the dog with a broken leg, still chose to come back and save the one who fired the gun. As for me, I'm not sure I could ever forgive myself. In the previous episode, Ellie rescued a ragged stray cat, named it Puzzle, then realized not everyone who gets left behind wants to be found. Some creatures just need a place where they don't have to stay on guard, and some wounds only need to be named, not healed right away. Puzzle stayed. Hope, Ellie's quiet dog, remained by her side as always. And Ellie began to rewrite the meaning of home, started with a cat that didn't run away. But that spring, another dog arrived. It wasn't the cat that needed Ellie. It was a stranger, carrying a dog with a broken leg, standing at the shelter gate, saying, "She pulled me out of the rubble. I can't let her die." He didn't say much about himself, but there was something in Shadow's eyes, the dog's name, that told Ellie she had lived between command and trust. And maybe the man had too. Can someone who once held a gun learn how to hold a hand without trembling? And can Ellie, who thought she had gotten used to being left, dare to trust one more time? 8 months after Puzzle arrived, Willow's light stepped into early spring, the season of things not yet fully shaped. Rain still lingered from late winter, leaving damp stains across the shelter's roof that hadn't had time to dry. Grass had started growing back along the old paths, pushing through cracks in the pavement, as if to remind that some things, no matter how many times trampled, always quietly return. Ellie placed a new photo on the shelf, a shot of Hope lying beside Puzzle, both asleep. Beneath it, she wrote, "Somehow we all chose to stay." The print was slightly blurry, the corner overexposed, but she didn't want to retake it. It was real, the way beautiful moments often come wrapped in imperfection. That morning, Hope was lying at the doorstep as usual. Puzzle was curled up in the fabric-lined cardboard box Ellie had placed on the exam table, its favorite sleeping spot. The shelter was peacefully quiet. Ellie was trimming the ivy along the fence when she heard the sudden screech of brakes outside the gate. The sound wasn't like someone coming to donate. It wasn't like a lost visitor either. It was short, urgent, heavy, like a decision made too late. When she stepped out, the man was already standing by the low wooden gate, tall, slightly hunched from carrying something. A dog. Blood soaked half of his gray shirt. His wrist veins were taut, gripping tightly, but his voice was low, shaking, as if he was the one on the verge of breaking. "She pulled me out of the rubble. I can't let her die." Ellie didn't ask further, didn't ask what had happened, didn't ask who he was. She simply opened the gate, took the dog from his arms, and led them both inside. The moment didn't feel like an emergency. It felt like catching a secret that was gasping for air. The dog was heavy, with long, dark amber fur. Her right hind leg was swollen and bent at the wrong angle. No collar, but a worn leather strap tied around her chest. Her eyes weren't afraid, but they weren't hopeful either, like someone who had obeyed too many commands for too long to remember she could say no. Ellie laid her on the table. Hope stood by, silent. She glanced at the man. He hadn't moved, hadn't stepped forward, hadn't stepped away. His eyes fixed on the dog, as if letting go for even a second would make them lose each other forever. Ellie carefully cleaned the thick fur of the dog, wiping away dried mud and blood, then used scissors to cut away the matted clumps around the wound. Shadow didn't whimper or flinch. She lay still, as if used to people touching her, without needing to explain why. "No anesthesia?" Caleb asked, his voice softer than his appearance. Ellie shook her head. She's not resisting, and if she can endure this much pain, I don't want her to forget she survived. The answer made Caleb fall silent for a moment. He didn't ask anything else. Hope lay beneath the table, eyes fixed on Shadow. Ellie noticed. Her dog usually stayed cautious around new animals, but this time There was no growling, no backing away, just watching, as if recognizing something familiar in Shadow, not a scent, but something lost and now returned. Shadow's injury was complicated, a dislocated kneecap and possibly torn ligaments. Ellie wasn't a surgeon, but she knew enough to try to save the leg, if they were still in time. She applied a temporary splint, cleaned the raw flesh, then gave an antibiotic injection. Through the whole process, Caleb didn't step closer. He leaned against a wooden wall, gripping his backpack strap tightly, eyes locked on Shadow's leg like he could somehow ease the pain by staring hard enough. There was a moment when Ellie saw his knuckles go white, then slowly relax, as if convincing himself that the worst had passed. When she finished wrapping the wound, Caleb gave a slight nod instead of words. "You can leave her here a few days," Ellie said. "I'll monitor the infection, but if the bones misaligned, surgery might be necessary." Caleb said nothing. A breeze slipped through the doorframe, carrying the scent of damp grass and seasonal change. No one spoke further, but no one left. Ellie laid out an old blanket on the floor for Shadow, placing it near the fireplace. The dog didn't react, only shifted slowly and rested her head on her front paws, eyes still open. Hope came closer, sniffed gently around Shadow's neck, then laid down about a hand's length away. Ellie couldn't remember the last time anyone had stayed this long at the shelter, and strangely, Caleb's presence didn't make the room feel smaller. It only made her feel like something still needed to be said. 2 days later, Shadow still wouldn't eat. Ellie had tried shredded chicken, thin porridge, even the pate Hope used to love when she had a sore throat. But Shadow only licked the rim of the bowl, then turned her head away. Caleb said nothing, just watched. Every time Ellie bent down to check Shadow's leg, he quietly adjusted the blanket, doing something without needing permission. On the third day, heavy rain fell. The metal roof clattered all afternoon. Ellie was rearranging herbal medicine in the back room when she heard a soft noise, the sound of a bowl clinking on the floor. When she stepped out, Shadow was licking the chicken broth, slowly, cautiously, but truly. Caleb didn't look at her. He only looked at Shadow. But something in his shoulders loosened, like a sigh that had been held too long finally slipping out from beneath his ribs. "You've been staying here the past few days," Ellie said as they covered the cat pens with a tarp. "Don't need to go home?" Caleb simply answered, "My home's far away," then said nothing more. Ellie didn't ask further, not because she wasn't curious, but because she had learned that some people, when they choose to stay, are already giving you their answer. They worked in silence all afternoon. Caleb fixed a broken hinge on the metal door. Ellie cut more rope to hang bundles of herbs. Hope wandered between the two of them, like a child feeling safe in the quiet presence of adults. When Ellie bent down to pull the sack of hay, Caleb stepped in, saying nothing, and took one end. His hand brushed the back of hers, cold firm, but she didn't pull away. It wasn't a significant moment, but in a string of cold, damp days, there was something in that brief touch that made Ellie feel steadied again, like a stone that had been rolling for a long time had finally come to rest on soft ground. When night fell, Shadow shifted for the first time and pushed herself up. Her back leg was still weak, but she didn't whimper. Caleb stepped forward, not in a rush, not calling. Shadow looked at him. The look wasn't fierce anymore, just quiet. And Ellie knew. It wasn't that the dog had learned to trust again, but that she had never truly lost it. She just needed someone patient enough not to demand she prove it. That night, Ellie didn't sleep in a room inside the shelter like she usually did. She brought a small mattress out to the old building, the one with the fireplace and the cage where Shadow was lying. She didn't need to be there, but for some reason, she didn't want the dog to lie there alone. And maybe she didn't want Caleb to be alone there either. Caleb didn't object. He simply shifted his seat away from the window and draped an extra blanket over the chair beside him. No one said who would stay, but neither of them left. The fire crackled in the cast-iron stove. Outside, the rain fell steadily. Wind pushed in long gusts through the gaps in the wood panels. Hope lay between Ellie and Shadow, a gentle boundary, not a block, just a mark. Puzzle was somewhere in the main house. Cats choose solitude in their own way. When Ellie woke in the night at the sound of a soft thump, she saw Caleb sitting close beside Shadow, his body almost leaning forward, hands trembling slightly on the dog's shoulder. She wasn't sure what he was doing, touching or holding, but his face didn't look like someone caring for a wound. It looked like someone trying to apologize without saying the words. Shadow didn't move, but her eyes were open and calm. Ellie didn't step in. She stayed still in the dark, watching through the flickering glow of the fire. She didn't understand everything Caleb was carrying, but something in his posture, the way his chest rose and felt like each breath had to pass through something heavy, made her realize this man hadn't just brought in a wounded dog. He was trying to mend something in himself, and no one had noticed. When Caleb stood up, he quietly pulled a small object from his backpack, a worn leather piece shaped like a keychain, old and curled at the edges. He placed it beside Shadow, then turned away. Ellie looked at the object. Etched into the leather was a faded image. Faint, but clear enough to see the head of a deer. No name, no number, just a symbol that would be familiar only to those who once belonged to the forest. Ellie didn't ask, but quiet suspicion began to open inside her. Not quite about Caleb himself, but about why he had never explained how Shadow had been trained, or what she had once been trained to do. The next morning, Ellie woke up before Caleb. She made coffee, not because she needed to be alert, but because the smell of coffee always made the shelter feel more like home, even when the things inside it hadn't yet been fixed. Shadow was still lying still. The wound had scabbed over, slightly swollen, but no longer bleeding. When Ellie approached, she didn't flinch. In fact, for the first time, she lifted her head at the sound of Ellie's footsteps, not out of fear, but out of recognition. Caleb stepped in from the porch, his old jacket slung over one shoulder. He didn't look directly at Ellie, but stopped when he saw Shadow nuzzling her hand. "That's strange," he said, almost to himself. "She's never done that with anyone but me." Ellie didn't reply. She crouched down, whispered something indistinct into Shadow's ear, then slowly pulled her hand away. As she stood up, Caleb handed her an old metal cup. "It's mine, but you made the coffee." Ellie gave a soft laugh, not at what he said, but at the way he said it. It no longer sounded dry like a hammer, striking hardwood. There was something softened in it, even if just a little. They sat on the steps of the storage shed, cups in hand, under a light fog, the scent of damp earth rising from the grass. Hope rested her head on Ellie's leg, while Shadow quietly crawled outside and lay down on a dry patch of ground, a few steps away. Back then, Caleb started and stopped. Ellie turned toward him, not urging, just looking, like a rest note waiting patiently for the next measure, whether it came or not. "There was a time I thought I'd never return to a place with blood in it," he said, "whether from animals or people." "Then why come here?" Ellie asked, not pressing. Caleb stared out across the field. "Because Shadow came back, even though she could have run. I thought, if she didn't leave me, maybe I'm not beyond saving." Ellie didn't say anything. She wasn't sure if that was the real reason. But what she did know was this. The man sitting beside her, even while hiding a part of himself, was present. And being present to her had always been the beginning of everything. A week later, Shadow could stand on all four legs. Not quickly, not steadily, but enough to leave her resting spot and walk to her water bowl. Ellie watched her move, the back leg still limping, but no longer dragging. She said nothing, only nodded slightly. In the world of animals, that was a quiet but persistent victory. Caleb was out in the yard, sawing rotted planks from the old kennel. He didn't ask Ellie if she needed help, nor did he ask when he should leave. He just stayed a little more each day, fixing broken latches, tidying loose wires, folding up things she had left unfinished. Ellie realized she didn't know exactly when he started staying, or when she stopped wanting him to leave. One afternoon, under soft sunlight, Ellie was filling out Shadow's medical file when she saw Hope sitting at the front door, head tilted toward the key hook. The dog didn't bark, just waited. Hanging there was a new keychain, a brass dog, tail curled, ears pointed, engraved with a single word, still. No one saw Caleb hang it. No one knew when he had left. But in the mailbox beside the door, there was a small note written in sharp, simple handwriting. I don't know when I'll come back, but if Shadow chooses to stay, maybe I'll learn how to do that too. Ellie held the note for a long time, not because of what it said, but because of the silent admission it carried, that some people don't need to be forgiven, only to be brave enough not to run again. Hope came and lay beside her feet. Shadow, now allowed to step out into the yard, lay at the edge of the porch, head held high, eyes fixed on the field where Caleb once sat repairing the steps. She didn't bark, she didn't whine, but her gaze never left. Ellie didn't need to name the bond between her and Caleb. It wasn't born from a touch. It didn't come from any particular night. It came from the days when no one left. Inside the shelter, everything was still messy, damp, and in need of fixing. But now, there were 3 beings in the yard, 1 human, 2 dogs, who had once carried broken parts, and all of them were still standing. Not perfect, just still here. The next morning, Ellie took the whiteboard from the medicine room, the one she used to jot down medication notes, shot schedules, names of new arrivals. She wiped away all the old writing and wrote a single sentence in black marker. Some things don't stay because they're broken. They stay because someone didn't leave. She didn't explain the sentence to anyone, but when she put the marker down, it felt like something in the shelter went quiet for a moment, as if the space itself had realized it had just been rewritten. Shadow was moved to the larger kennel, the one where morning sunlight poured straight in. Ellie officially entered her name into the record. Name, Shadow. Condition, fractured hind leg, now stable. Notes, allowed to run when ready. No need to wait for commands. Hope lay nearby, eyes half closed. Ellie knew her dog had never really guarded anything. She simply showed up at the right time, in the right place, in the right way. Ellie knelt down and ran her hand along Hope's spine, then stood up. On the small shelf by her bed, she placed a keychain Caleb had left next to an empty photo frame, one she'd already chosen to hold something from a present. Not a picture of an animal, not a person, but maybe a moment. The shelter had begun to settle into a new rhythm. Kids came on weekends to learn basic rescue skills. A new volunteer, a shy boy named Noah, was assigned at cat kennel cleanup. Ellie found herself cleaning not just the roof tiles, but also the quiet corners inside herself that she had long ignored. As she crossed the yard, she saw a Shadow lie in the sun, eyes softly closed. The dog heard her steps but didn't open her eyes, only nodded slightly, as if to say, I know it's you, and I know you're still here. Ellie sat down beside her, saying nothing. Hope came and lay down too, out of habit more than choice. The breeze drifted through, carrying the scent of damp earth mixed with early spring sunlight. Ellie looked toward the fence where Caleb had once fixed a hinge, not because she hoped to see him return, but because some people, even in their absence, leave behind a space that doesn't feel empty. No one knew whether Caleb would come back, but the keychain still hung on the wall, and Shadow, the dog who once couldn't stand, now lay in the center of the shelter, as if she had never belonged anywhere else. I used to think that what made me trust someone were the things they said. But Caleb didn't say much. He didn't talk about the past. Didn't promise anything for the future. He just stayed long enough for me to realize some people don't enter your life with grand gestures or words. They arrive through presence, steady, quiet, and unwavering. I don't know exactly when I stopped feeling uneasy having a stranger in the yard. Maybe it was when hope lay close to shadow without needing a command. Or maybe it was when I made morning coffee and grabbed a second cup, not out of politeness, but because it felt natural. Shadow used to be a creature that only knew obedience. Her eyes once reflected nothing but exhaustion. But today, she lay in the middle of the yard, head resting on her front legs, eyes half closed and at peace. And I, the person who once believed I was only good enough to care for what had been left behind, finally accepted another truth. No one has to be whole to deserve to stay. No one has to tell their full story to be trusted. Maybe what tells me I'm healing isn't a feeling of relief. It's that I no longer need a reason to explain why I care. I don't know if Caleb will come back, but I know that if he doesn't, nothing has been taken away, because what he left behind is a part that has been slowly, steadily restored. Hope still keeps watch over everything that moves in the shelter. Shadow now gives occasional soft bark when she sees Noah running, and Puzzle, the first cat I ever called by a real name, now sleeps soundly in the wooden box I lined with one of my old shirts. I think maybe I've stopped waiting for someone to arrive. I'm just learning how to recognize when someone has already stayed. A letter to the future, Ellie. If one day you find yourself feeling empty in a room with someone you can't seem to reach, remember the small yard behind the shelter on a morning in early spring, where a dog with a broken leg chose to stay, and someone who said nothing fixed a broken latch with his bare hands. If you ever feel the urge to leave before being left, remember the last time you asked nothing, someone left behind a keychain instead of a promise. If you find yourself needing too many reasons to stay, look at Hope. She doesn't ask, doesn't demand, but she's always there. Don't wait for someone to come back. Just learn to recognize when someone has truly been here. Ellie. There are creatures that don't resist, not because they don't feel pain, but because they've been forced into silence too many times. There are dogs that no longer bark, yet still follow their person with their eyes until the very last second. There are people who carry wounds no one can see, and who learn to bandage them with presence instead of stories. Caleb didn't ask to stay, but he didn't walk away either. His staying didn't come from an invitation, but from someone who once lost the road back. Shadow didn't heal completely, but she stood, and that is the most beautiful definition of recovery. Ellie didn't know when she stopped waiting for promises from someone. She only knew that one early spring morning, she made an extra cup of coffee and placed a second mug next to her own, like an instinct. Hope is still the dog who doesn't speak, but she always knows when to look. She doesn't do anything special except be there. In life, not everyone who needs love knows how to ask for it, and not everyone who loves has the patience to wait without needing an answer right away. We've all been Shadow. We've all been Ellie. And sometimes, if we're lucky, we've had a hope. This episode doesn't tell a love story, but in it, a connection has taken root, quiet, unspoken. Love doesn't need to be named every time it happens. It only needs to be seen and not ignored. A keychain, a bandage changed with care, a nod between two people who barely know each other. Sometimes that's enough for someone to relearn how to trust. Episode 2 is a reminder. You don't need to tell your whole past to have a place in the present. You just need someone who doesn't walk away once they've seen where you've been broken. This episode is about wounds that don't need stitches pulled. Just time. If you've ever seen yourself in Shadow's gaze or in Caleb's silence, share a small piece of that in the comments below. Maybe the story you tell will help someone else feel a little less alone. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next episodes of Willow's Light. Each week is a quiet slice of healing, not needing answers, just presence